Yeah.
Miss Jones, how are you doing?
Hello,
I'm good.
guys.
Good together.
Hello, Indian David.
Hi. So this is our inaugural broadcast for the Patty Lucia's Storybridge. Today we have Miss Jones with us, but I'm not going to take it up. We have Andrew in our room with us, giving support, and myself as well. So we're about to let people into the room. For those people who are in on Facebook, you guys are just watching a photo stream right now. Please come into the room if you want to interact with us. The room is open. For those of you who don't know what the room ID is, I'm just going to pick it up for you. It is 656-816-1997. If you if you didn't get that, you can absolutely go onto the Universal Citizen media page, or you can go to the Ars Essentia page or the GH page. These numbers have been put there for you guys. Right now, we're about to let people into the room. Patty, you ready for this broadcast? Mrs. Jones, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Have some fun.
Excellent.
Absolutely.
So I'm
Thanks,
about to
guys.
switch
You're the best.
you guys over to a live camera. Thank you very much. Take care. And we are live, people.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. This is Patty Lucia and Storybridge with me, your host, Patty Lucia. I am a teacher and the author of Wildflowers in Present Tenses. And this, hold on just a second. Okay. Thank you, David. And this podcast is all about the power of story. What do I mean by that? Humans are all storytellers, automatic storytellers, and there is such power in story and in words and in language, and often we do not understand how powerful the stories are that we tell. So I'm interested also in the gap between who we are and the stories we tell about ourselves. Why do I think having an erotic coach as a guest on my podcast is so important? Well, I have to tell you, I'm thrilled to have Mrs. Jones with us this evening. She is an erotic coach. And why do I think it would be such an amazing thing to have her on my podcast? Well, nowhere, I think, in my opinion, is the gap between our deepest truths and the stories we tell so apparent as in our sexuality. I know that that has been true for me. Even though I thought at a young age, I made decisions to be more free in my sexuality. I realized that there's still a very big gap between my deepest truths and desires and the story that I tell myself and others. So even with our intimate partners, we often leave out our deepest truths and desires. We may even hide our deepest truths and desires from ourselves. That's how much shame, judgment interfere with our sexuality. Now, on a personal note, I'm writing a book called This Amazing Body, and it chronicles my journey towards a more loving relationship with my body and more optimal health in my postmenopausal years. But recently, I discovered a gaping hole in my book, and in my story. I was leaving out sex and sexuality. How can you write a book about a better relationship with your body and leave that out? All right. So that, I mentioned it here and there, but that was just a gaping hole. So it became obvious that I was missing an essential part of my story, my relationship to sensuality, pleasure, sex, sexuality. So, David, and I have to say that I recently had a wild experience on the Andrew Bartz's show, where that was also being hosted by David, and they were had call in people, and I called in. And when Andrew and David asked me, "What's the biggest obstacle to your current development?" I said, "Sex and sexuality." And of course, um, I'm just going to say this: they really kicked my ass about this, and just so much so that I already had Mrs. Jones' number, but the next day I was calling her saying, "You know what? We need to talk right away." um, so, so David introduced me to Mrs. Jones, and I've begun to take my first steps towards a more honest relationship with my sexuality. So, for those of you who are listening, I'd like to ask you this: how often have you thought, this is just as good as it's going to get? Or maybe you thought, I should be satisfied. There are more important things to think about. Or maybe, this sort of thing was important when I was young, but I have more and more practical things to think about and do now. Or, I would have liked to have done that, but my husband, wife, partner isn't really into it, so I guess I should just let that go. Or often, as women, we'll say, I want it, to want more than what I have right now would just be selfish. So I'm excited to have Mrs. Jones with me this evening. She's going to share her story of her own journey to becoming an erotic coach and what exactly she does. Then we'll open it up for your questions. And so, Mrs. Jones, how very exciting it is to have you on this podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Patty. I've so been enjoying getting to know you, and we have such amazing conversations when we're not on air. So this is just going to be so much fun.
Absolutely. So, what can you tell us, or what was it like going from, where you were to being an erotic coach? Can you tell us what that story looked like for you?
Well, I grew up in mid America, and it was very, very conservative. So um, it was church and what was brought into my world by the adults around me. And I was basically trained to grow up and get married and have children. And I got in trouble when I was a kid because I was actually very curious till about age 5 around my sexuality. And I just thought I would like get my cousins to kiss each other's boobs and make them like look like boobs, and I got told on. So I got in trouble, and my mom decided like educating me was the best thing. So she bought me these books like Where Did I Come From? How Did I Get Here? And talked to me about how she was a virgin when she got married. And so she would always say to me, I'm not telling you these things because I want you to do those things, but I want you just to be educated on the choices that you make. So I decided very, very young that I was going to be a virgin, and I never touched myself. I didn't really have dreams about sex. When I was in high school, I got the reputation as being called Mary, and embarrassingly enough, like from across the room, they'd be like, why do they call you Mary? Oh yeah, because you're the Virgin Mary. And but when I met the person I was going to marry, we really only dated for 3 months, and I moved. And I came back about 6 months later and married him. So I've married a person I knew 3 months, basically. And tomorrow we celebrate 31 years. But I didn't know anything about sex when I got married. And I remember the first year, my first anniversary, pulling over to the side of the road and being like, I married a fairy tale. And he was my prince, but I was like, this is not what am I going to do? Like I said yes to this whole fairy tale image of what was in my own head without having anything to look at around that. And so it was at that point that I was like, I gotta make this work. And I started doing the work, and I started buying books. And my poor husband, he would go through like me deciding I was gonna like, I would buy a video on how to strip. And I would be one of those people that I'd be trying to strip off my clothes to be sexy, and I would trip over the boa, or I would do like weird stuff, or I'd be like, hey, let's try this position, or how about this? Um and it was sad because like sometimes I hadn't still had an orgasm. I don't think I had an orgasm until like 5 years into my marriage. And I would ask some of my girlfriends, I'm like, hey, do you have an orgasm? And they're like, yeah, like every time. Shame. Because then I was like, oh, well, what does that feel like? Like,
Wow.
um, and I didn't know. And like a couple times I'd start like reading, oh, well, if you start to learn your own body, but then I was afraid to get caught. And
Mm.
so one time, like my husband caught me, and I was just like, "No, I don't care." Like, but I mean, it was just this huge journey of this very innocent person who was trying to find information in the world. And once again, all I had, I was in Bible study. I was trying to be a mom, and trying to raise my kids, and I was just lost,
Mhm.
and I felt like a lot of times we were like going through the motions. We were doing what we had been told to do, but we didn't have that connection. I always say that I've fallen in love with my husband like multiple times. Um, Sometimes people get married multiple times, but sometimes you get married to the same person over and over again. And we kind of came to a place where I was like, man, I'm bored. I am bored. How do we shake this shit up? Because um yeah, I was just dying this slow death. And I just kind of noticed that people would ask you, like I have teenagers come over and babysit my kids, and everyone was asking, what do you want to do when you grow up? Like, what do you want to be? And I was like, oh, I remember people asking me that until I got married and had kids, and then they just quit asking me.
Yeah,
And
because you had done it, because that
yeah,
was it.
so like I wasn't supposed to have dreams or goals or wishes anymore. And I was just like, wow. Sometimes my kids would go, Mom, did you make any mistakes? I was like, yeah, 3. They're like, oh, Mom. Like, well, not really, but I wish that somebody might have like given me a little bit more of a hint of like what life is about. And so actually told my husband, I was like, take me somewhere, and just, I don't even want to know where we're going, but just tell me whether I need to bring cold clothes or warm clothes. And he's like, okay, you want me to shake your shit up? I'll shake your shit up. And so all of a sudden, like he told me warm clothes. So I get on an airplane and I'm flying to Jamaica. And um I land, and we get in this van, and we're just me and him and this guy. I've never been to Jamaica before. And the guy goes, does she know where she's going? And he's like, oh no, she has no clue. And I'm like, my stomach starts to like do this twirling like thing. And we get to this resort, and it was at the time, it was called Hedonism 3. And he booked on the side of the nudist part where we could look out our window and see like naked people. And we were like looking out the window, and they were all like 60-year-old people. And are you gonna go out there? I'm like, I'm going to the nude prude beach. And I thought, funny, like one night I got up to go eat. Oh, well, we get there, and he had booked me a massage. So I go down to get this massage, and I come out, And right in front of me on this bridge is this woman with long hair all the way down to her ass. And there's this photographer there taking a picture of her, but she's completely nude. And I just start like backing away, and I back up into the massage therapist, and she's like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay, but I think I'm gonna walk this way." And so then I go a different way, and I'm all by myself. And I walk up to this bar, and there's these girls or women, not girls, but women, and they have no tops on. They have these thong bikinis, and the bartender is spraying their tits with this sprayer. So I start backing away again. And I what went through my mind was not my mind was like, how am I supposed to compete with these women? I mean, like, I'm a mom
Mhm.
with children, and I went back to the room, and what I found out was we were there during the show we went to that night was like Miss America for strippers of the United States. So all the best strippers in the country are at the resort with me doing these shows, which well, I'd never been in a strip club before. I'd never seen strippers before. And they're doing these amazing shows like with the big champagne glasses and the bubble,
Mm.
and they're letting people spray colored stuff on their white t-shirts, and then they're ripping them off. And I I was just like, this is amazing. And this one girl, like, she she stripped down, and I could see that she had nipple piercings. So I walked up to her and I was like, "Can I ask you a question?" And she's like, "Yeah." And I was like, "I noticed you have nipple piercings." I'm like, "Do you have anything down there?" And she's like, "Oh yes, baby, I got something down there too." And I was like, I go, "Does it increase your orgasm?" And she's like, "Oh, yeah." And I was like, I went over to my husband. I said, "I want one of those things that go down there." And, we walked around the resort, but this was our first experience. We never even saw anything. So I didn't even think anything of it. So I would just come back and say, "We went to this place called Hito 3, and we think you should go there." And at the time, I didn't know that there was like, I didn't know about anything.
Mm. Mhm.
So a couple of weeks later, we decided to go back to another resort, another nudist resort, and people are like, we go down to the pool. I'd never seen people really naked before at this point. So I was 39 years old. And he's like, "Are you going to get naked?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I'm getting naked." And I just start throwing my clothes off, but I had these dark sunglasses on, and I'm just like looking at everybody's body. And it was like New Year's, and people are coming up to me and they're like, "Are you a swinger?" And I was like, "What is a swinger?" And I'm like, "I just got naked for the first time. I don't know what a swinger is." And so it was funny, and this is the funniest story because we go out one night, and everyone was so friendly, and people were talking to us, and suddenly this guy goes, "Where's your husband?" And I was like, "Well, I guess he's over there kissing that girl." And he's like, "Are you okay with that?" I'm like, I guess they could have asked me.
Mhm.
So we'd been monogamous for 20 years, and we're going back to the room. You could get ready for the next part of the night. And his chest is like all up and out, and he's like a rooster. This just like he's walking, and he's so proud of himself. And he goes to grab my hand, and I throw his hand down, and he's like, "Oh." I was like, "Let me teach you something. Don't you ever do anything again without making eye contact with me." So we didn't go back out that night.
Mm. Hmm.
But the next day, I'm sitting by the pool, and I had noticed this really gorgeous looking Mexican man the night before, and he was wearing these white shorts, and the contrast of his skin with his shorts. And I was by the pool and I looked over and he was sitting with these two women and they started massaging each other. And I still had my sunglasses on, trying to be like, I'm not looking at anything.
Mm.
But he comes walking over and he's like, hey, would you like to come join them? And I was like, yeah, I would. And I got up and I walked over and there was a wedding going down on the beach and they handed me a flower and I'm taking this flower across this woman's body and she kind of opens her eyes and looks at me and then she closes her eyes and then so we're just giving her this like pleasure and this massage and then they're like, hey, do you want to go to the hot tub with us? And I was like, yeah, I think I do. And we go up and we get on these beds and they start to show me how to touch this woman and touch her vagina and how to bring her to an orgasm. And I'd never touched a woman's vagina before that moment. And my we brought her to an orgasm and then one of us lay down and then we brought the next person to an orgasm and the next thing we know we had this line of women lined up and the men were like, can we play? We're like, nope. And one woman after another would lay down and all these women were like rubbing them and touching them and then we'd bring them to an orgasm. And we did that for like 2 hours.
Wow.
And
Wow.
my husband went to take me back to the room and he almost had to carry me because I was just like so weak. And we got
Mhm.
back to the room and my body was just like convulsing and shaking. And I didn't know it was Korea, or I think Korea's at the time. I didn't know what it
Mhm.
was. Like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, I don't know. It is energetic orgasms that were just going through my body. And he finally just threw a sheet over me. He's like, well, I'm just going to throw this sheet over you and I'm going to try to go to sleep because we got to go to dinner here in about an hour. And so that led me into a whole other phase of my life. So we went home and he's like, well, are you a swinger or are you a nudist? And I was like, I don't know. I need to get a book. So I found a book on being a swinger or being a nudist. And he's like, so I go, I think I'm a nudist. I don't think I can do that swinging thing. Like, I don't know if I want another man to touch me. But it was like, we were so excited and it had renewed so much energy between us that we were going back to this resort like every 6 weeks. My mom was like, am I watching the kids again? You keep going to Mexico. Why do you keep going to Mexico? And I'm like, we're just going. and and then there was this whole other night, this experience, and granted, I've had a lot of experiences. This is like 11 years ago.
Mm.
And but these entertainers came in the room and there was this one entertainer and he was a lion tamer and he came into the room with these two women dressed like cats, wild cats. And I was wearing this leopard dress that night and my husband was having permission to flirt with this woman behind me, but he could not reach me. But he could feel that I was like being drawn into this entertainment of these erotic dancers dancing. And I can hear him behind me going, grab her, don't let her do it. And the next thing I know, I'm dancing with these two women and I'm dancing with this lion tamer and they are undressing me in this room. And we go into this erotic, just sexy trance dance. And then after that, he's like, hey, they want us to go back to their room with them. And I'm like, okay. And so we head up to the room, and the husband tries to take me over to be just with me. And my husband starts playing with his wife on the bed. And I'm like, no, 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 no. I want to watch. I want to see this. And so we all got on the same bed, and like, this man is playing with me and I'm watching my husband with this other woman. And I was like, it was amazing. And so the next day we ended up sleeping there with them, and we get up in the morning and we're walking back to our room and he's like, all right, Shelly, what are you what Mrs. Jones, what are you now? I am a fucking swinger. Are you kidding me? I the candy store and I was like, this is some yummy kind of stuff. And we went to breakfast, and this woman comes walking in, and she's like 70 years old, and there was just something magical about this woman. And I was watching her. I could feel her energy. I didn't even know about energy then. I knew I could sense something about people, but I was still coming from that Midwestern strong Christian, not allowed to learn about energy. But I felt it. And her and her husband came and sat right next to me. Of course they did. And this woman was a sex therapist. They lived in Israel, and they're like, "You should come and visit us. We have like our land is over a mile and a half of Ocean View Beach, and you can just come and stay with us." And they were telling us that they get married every 7 years, and they always get married nude. And they said the hardest time was finding the pastor or someone because they had to be nude too. And it was at that moment I just I started to cry because I had never felt so accepted, so non-judged, and so free ever in my life than that moment.
Mm.
And I'm gonna take a break because that was really that is the whole big beginning of this journey that we have been on.
So, so you went to Israel. You ended up going to Israel.
I didn't go to Israel. I did talk to this woman a couple of times. She was there to support me, but they had told us about a place called Cap d'Agde, France, the Naked City, and we were getting ready to celebrate our 20th wedding anniversary. So we went to France for our wedding anniversary, and we went to some swinger clubs in Paris, which were really that's a interesting story there. And then we went to this naked city, which is like 20,000 people naked on the beach, grandmas, grandkids, all inclusive. So the different parts of the beach represent different types of people and acceptance.
So I there is so much that you that you just shared, and thank you. It's really, so many of us have also grown up in conservative families, heavy influence of the church. I know that that's been true for me too, and so many of us have ended up getting into relationships based on that fairy tale ideal, right? Like you did. Whether we're straight, we're gay, whatever, it seems like we're kind of we get into that. When you were talking about trying to pole dance, I had the image of Jamie Lee Curtis in True Lies. Remember that scene where she's trying and just precious. But I wanted to ask you that moment when you were watching your husband pleasuring a woman, and that was just so exciting to you. That's something that I think, like, people might hear that and say, "What? Isn't that how? There's what?" And because it flies in the face of so much of what we've been taught. So can you unpack that a little bit? Like, what was so exciting for you about that? What about that experience was a turn on, exciting?
Well, in that particular moment, I had never really seen other people have sex.
Mm,
So it was just so really erotic and sensual seeing two human beings. Like it's kind of like looking at like what does my back look like right now? You know, you know,
mhm,
you're
mhm,
you're having sex with this person and you're not really watching, but and it's different. Like I don't really like porn, and it never really
mhm,
interested me visually to watch porn, but to be in the same room, to feel the energy, to hear
mm,
to see two human beings coming together in such a animalistic, primitive way, I just found
mhm.
it. I was like, "Wow, this is amazing!" And to this day, I get turned on watching him have sex with other people. So, um,
Because there is really something about being in the room, your energy commingling with that energy, and it's far more real than porn could ever be.
mhm.
You know, other the sounds are real, the orgasms are real, everything about it is real. So it's when you talk about the energy of it, there's an awful lot of energy in the room, and you get to be kind of in that energy, interacting with that energy.
Yeah, and a lot of people we've met over the years, we've become really good friends with over time, and there's just this trust and connection. That's really been wonderful. Some of my best friends I met during my journeys of traveling. And what's
Mm,
so wonderful about it is I can just be me. I don't have to hide anything from them. And it's acceptance. And you can't always get that walking down the street. In fact, it's sometimes I don't even want to talk to people walking down the street. I can usually tell really quickly if this is going to be a comfortable conversation or I'll just go quiet. So
mhm,
this is a gift that a lot of people are receiving is me telling my story. I don't even always tell my story to my clients because when I am a coach, my job is to help guide them through their own experiences and journey, and it's all about them. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to actually be able to share my story.
yeah, no, and it's beautiful, and the thing is that it's a story that so many of us can relate to. But the difference is that I think had, you were partnered, you had a husband who kind of wanted to go on an adventure with you.
Mhm.
He just kind of wanted to take that, you know, to stir it up, as he said.
Yeah, it was kind of the point in our marriage where it was grow apart or grow together.
Hmm.
And we made a decision to grow together. And even to this day, um, I get scared sometimes because there became a point in time where my husband no longer wanted to really do lifestyle. And so we had another hard conversation when I came to him, and he wanted to have another connection with another person, but have it be just that connection. He felt like lifestyle sometimes for him felt like he was a pony show or he had to perform, and he's like, I really just want to have someone else I can connect with like I connect with you because we've been together a long time. And
Hmm.
but I was like, yeah, well, guess what? I kind of like the lifestyle, and I really do. And there's a lot to ownership of that, of coming to him and saying, well, I'm still going to do the swinger lifestyle.
And so that's what you mean when you say lifestyle. Is like
Yeah.
I so it's swinger lifestyle. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually involved in lots of different. I call them all different lifestyles because depending on the group of people, they all have different likes and interests, and they kind of interact in different ways. Like the BDSM community doesn't tend to have sexual encounters. You can do a lot of different scenes in the BDSM community with no sexual penetration.
Mhm.
Tantric communities tend to like a lot more energy sex, and
Mhm.
swingers are like, why aren't we fucking? Let's just get on the bed. And
Mhm.
so they so it's kind of funny. I kind of move around in all the different groups because I'm so curious and love
Mhm.
everything that has to do with sexuality. I'm pretty much a sex geek and a sex
Mhm.
nerd. So I mean, sometimes like when spanking was first introduced to me, I was like, I'm not going to be doing that. I'll be over in the corner watching you guys. I had no idea how kinky I was. Zero. It comes back to that, belief system that I'm
Yeah.
not supposed to want that, I'm not supposed to want that. And so throughout my whole journey, my only fight is myself, is my
Uh-huh.
own inner belief systems. And even to this day, I'm still healing some of that. I'm still
Mhm.
healing that conditioning and wondering if I'm too much. Um, Coming into things going, oh, I don't think I'll do that. But I have grown to a place where like, well, I'm kind of curious. I can always say no. Um, I think that's what's so great with me and my clients though too, is because pretty much whatever their interest is, I've either done it, know somebody who could help with it, or am curious about it myself. So um
Well, what
that
if
that's a pretty
I
big box.
I love that, and so
Hey,
I had a
Patty,
couple.
Patty,
Yes.
hey, Xander, can you back away from the microphone a little
Oh,
bit?
sure,
You're a little
sure.
too close to it. When you get really in depth in conversation, you're a little too close to the microphone.
All
It's
right,
overwhelming a little bit.
all
Go,
right.
go ahead. And
Thanks,
David,
Andrew.
I know you had something you wanted to say too.
David, did you want to go first?
No, I'm just going to enjoy the show
Oh,
for now.
okay.
Yeah.
So this is what I wanted to ask you, Ms. Jones, is um, so what was your process? And I think I have an idea, but just like what was your process in discovering what you liked? And how does one how does one discover? I mean, like you mentioned, am I a swinger? Am I into kink? Am I into S&M? Am I into like, and what if someone's kind of starting from zero? Like, I don't know what, what, what would you say to them?
Well, the funny thing is most people aren't like, I don't know. They're like, oh no. So, it's kind of starting people where they're at. I have so many times people say to me, oh, I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to feel pain. And they're not
Mhm.
talking about like physical pain, they're talking about emotional pain. And a lot of times I'm like, well, you're gonna feel pain. I mean, there's been times I've dropped to my knees and it hurt. It hurt. You can't play with fire and never have a time when you're not going to be like, or you have sex with someone, you're like, yeah, I'm not, why did I do that? And I'm not going to do that again. Or just
Mhm.
or saying yes when you didn't want to say yes because you wanted to make your partner happy. I see that a lot. I see that a lot of people doing things because they're afraid of losing their partner, or they're afraid of not knowing how to say no. It's the same as faking an orgasm. It's you're on this journey to become knowledgeable and conscious of just who you are as an individual. And I've come a long way because when I first started doing it, yes, I got to choose, but I was still kind of doing it because of my husband. I didn't have fantasies. I didn't know what I wanted. And it was through the last 11 years that I started getting really grounded in myself. And I went from saying, "Oh no, there's no way I'm going to try that," to, "Well, how could I feel safe to try that?"
Mm.
And I think that's the biggest thing with working with a coach is we teach
Mhm.
others how to do it safely, and how to have a little bit more insight so come you don't come head on to all the pain that I actually have went through to get to this place that I am now. I
Mhm.
can stop some of the mistakes that couples make. Um, I can help them communicate a lot better to each other. And I've really learned to see each one as the individual and feed each partner, and then teach each
Mhm.
partner how to be fed, how to feed each other, and give insight on that where maybe they were struggling, because you give what you tend to want to receive. And I've done this over and over. I mean, when I was reading all those books to try to please my husband, he might enjoy one thing, but I was so like, and I'd have 10 things I wanted to try. So before we even, he was like, "Oh yeah, that feels really good," and I would drop his arousal right back down with trying the next thing, and then he'd be like, "Oh yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, that feels really good," but I'd be so interested in what came next. So
Mm.
it's having that experience where you can say, well, let's see if we take them right here, what happens? And let's just play with that, and keeping them from trying to move on so quickly. There's so much experience. There's so much experience that comes with actually just being with a lot of people, myself,
Mhm.
and trying different things out. I was with someone last weekend, and they're like, "Oh, you figured me out," and they're like, "Okay, I'm going to
Mhm.
stay away from you for a minute," because he was actually,
Mhm.
this person was edging, and had been told he wasn't allowed to orgasm. So he was like, "Oh, you have me figured out, so I'm gonna go over here because you're gonna I can't resist you at this point." But that's how my mind works now. The minute I start touching people's body, I start figuring out, oh, they like this, oh, they like that. And I just start threading the needle together to see, ooh,
Mhm.
what if I poke you here? That
Yeah,
goes a
that's
long way to being like that girl that everybody called Mary, for sure.
definitely. So so you work with couples and you also work with people who are single,
Mhm.
right?
Yes, I also work with trans
Mhm.
and any type of gender preference. I have no judgment towards anybody.
Mhm. Mhm. Uh, I how so what is the process? How how do you help people discover what their true desires are? What they really want if they don't know?
Well, and that is a great question, Patty, because like, well, my girlfriend, who I've known for 25 years, got divorced when she was 26, and had the same type of sex forever. And when she talks to me and I introduce all these different things, she's like, "I don't know. How would I have ever known if I like that?" Because you don't know what you don't know. So getting someone that can introduce these new ideas in front of you and in a safe way has been huge for her. And sometimes, I scare her, and sometimes I push a little bit too far, but teaching her how to say no is huge. And and we both came from the same backgrounds. We raised
Mhm.
our kids together. We both made all the right decisions. The difference is one day she came home and all of her husband's stuff was gone. And it was a couple that was the last. They I never thought they would get divorced. I was like, you almost had to pick me up off the floor. I was like, no. They were one of those people that always did everything together. Um, but evidently he wasn't happy, and literally it devastated her. And that's something that's really going on in in our world right now too is women that dedicated their whole life to their marriage, their children, their husbands. We lived our lives the best that we could to please everybody around us. And not only were we kind of dying when we were married, but then we suddenly we wake up one day and our whole life changes. And and you just don't know.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I don't know where she'd be if she didn't have me, because I introduced her to this whole other world. I took her out of that depressing, horrible place that I, she lost like 20 pounds because she wasn't eating. And I got her out to get up off the ground.
Mhm.
And it was
So
kind of funny because she actually we didn't really tell anybody we were in the swinger lifestyles where we lived. She confronted us at
mhm.
at dinner one night, and we went home and my husband's like, "What is that about?" I'm like, "I don't know." And I went over and asked her, and I'm like, "Okay, do you want to know what we do?" And she's like, "I do." And she wanted to join into our become our girlfriend. And I was like, "No." And then my husband looked at me and I was like, "Oh, so we have this thing called taking away the cookie." So we teach we learn to lie when we're young kids. Our parents would put the cookie in the cookie jar and we were told not to get it. And then we go sneak the cookie. And our
Mm.
parent would see us sneaking the cookie. It was almost like they were standing around the corner and they'd go, did you take that cookie? You're like, "I didn't take the cookie." Oh, well, actually, at first we say, "Yeah, I took the cookie. That cookie was good. And I was eating it. Oh, that cookie tasted so good." And you're like, "What? You're not supposed to have those cookies. You haven't had dinner yet. I can't believe you stole that cookie." And you're like, so the next time, you don't care if they saw you or not. They're like, did you eat that cookie?" "I didn't eat that cookie." Mm-mm-mm. It's like that song, "It wasn't me," on the bathroom floor. It wasn't me.
Yeah, wasn't me.
Yeah,
Wasn't me.
I didn't do that. So when I said no, I looked at him. I was like, "Oh, did I take away the cookie?" He's like, "You did take away that cookie." And so I was like, "All right, you can have it. I will work on the cookie." And that was the hardest thing we went through. Was that relationship
Why?
right there?
Why?
Well, a stranger, watching him have
Mm.
sex with a stranger is one thing.
Mm.
Watching him have sex with someone who's so close to me, and it wasn't the sex, actually. It was we'd all be watching a movie and he put his arm around her
Mm.
and showed that he cared.
So
And
what was that about? Like,
I got jealous.
mm.
I got jealous. I got really triggered.
Mm.
And they would say, "Well, we don't want to hurt you." And I'd be like, "Well, I don't know when I'm going to get triggered." So I was reading books, because when we're going through stuff, we either get a coach, we get someone that
Mhm.
can help us through it, or we read. I do a lot of reading. I've done a lot of reading, and I found and that's when I really started turning inside. It's not what's going on around you that's upsetting you. It's your own belief systems, and that's where I go back to how I'm my biggest enemy. I'm the one always fighting me. So I was like, "Why am I jealous?" And I was like, "Oh, I have fear." And I remembered when I used to get Halloween candy when I was a kid, I would save it. I didn't want anyone else to eat my Halloween candy. Even if Halloween was 2 days away, my friends would come over and find my candy, and I still didn't want them to eat my candy. It was my candy. I wanted it when I wanted it. Don't eat my candy. And I really started looking at myself, and I stopped being jealous and started being really happy to see them getting what they wanted. And there comes a time where you start to really want the other person to live the absolute best life that they could possibly live.
Mhm.
And I quit saying no. And I quit making rules. And that doesn't mean we don't still get hurt. But when you know, I used to never fight with my husband. I used to never yell. I used to never get mad because I was afraid he was going to leave. And when I knew that he would not leave and he'd be there the next day, oh, we've had some really great fights. Fights where my kids would come upstairs and they would be like, Mom. And I'm like, no. Be afraid when I don't use my voice. Be afraid when I'm not able, because that means I'm afraid he's going to leave. I know this man is not leaving me. And so you kind of come into some agreements that knowing, okay, we're going to fuck up. What are we going to do when we fuck up? You're going to fuck up. I'm going to fuck up. But we're here for the long haul.
Mhm.
You know? And when you invite other people in your life, they'll be like, oh, I love you. And I'm like, yeah, I get you love me. Who wouldn't love somebody who meets in a suite and has a bottle of wine and a really nice dinner? I love you too. But I didn't birth my children and you were standing there holding my hand. When I throw up, you're not there holding the hair behind my head. If I get cancer, you're not going to be there.
Mhm.
This person who I've dedicated my life to is going to be there. But I want him to have sushi. I want him to have Italian. I want him to have Mexican. I want him to have whatever he wants. And you know what? I want it too. I want it too.
That's beautiful. Oh, wow. All right. So much to unpack here, but I want to see if you want to take a question from the chat or from callers. Yeah. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat, or you can raise your hand. And
Yeah, Patty.
Dave,
Yeah,
yes.
I will allow them. Just raise your hand. And for those of you who aren't in the Zoom room, please come into the Zoom room, which is the only way you can actually ask a question. And Patty will always take your questions, or just put up your hands if you want to interact, because I certainly have questions. So
Oh yeah.
I have lots of questions. Okay, so I'll let the others go first. Does anybody have any questions in the chat?
Chat, or you can raise your hand. Danny.
Danny, you can go ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, it's Danae.
Danae. Hi, Danae.
That's okay. My question for Mrs. Jones is because she hasn't reached that age yet of menopausal women and health issues, like what suggestions or tips do you have going forward when you've been through traumatic times during menopause? Surgically, health-wise, hormonal imbalances, and also cancer. So what suggestions would you have for an individual as a coach, putting into perspective for a woman like me?
Well, Danny, I'm curious, how old do you think I am?
Well, I think you've got a bit of a disguise, I must say. Well done, however. But I would say you're in your early 50s.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah, yeah. I'm usually quite intuitive about that aspect. But yeah, so what suggestions do you have? I mean, I've had a hell of a year as a cancer survivor these last 2 years, and menopausally for the last 6 years.
So what is going on with you? Where do
Um,
you
well,
study?
I was with a partner for 6 years, and with my cancer diagnosis, and he was just too needy. So I asked him. We're great friends, but I asked him to, you know, be in his own space, and so I've just been concentrating on getting my health back. I mean, sexuality has not even been on my mindset or mind frame. It's more just getting my health back.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, pleasure can be a lot of different ways. On a day-to-day basis and just getting your health back, where do you find your own pleasure?
Spending time with my grandkids, actually. I just really, really, um, that that's just, and so I'm wondering if that's a typical thing of a menopausal woman, when your foresight and your goals of sexuality change quite drastically as you're in this next stage of your life. I mean, I know you were talking about that 70-year-old woman who is a erotic coach like yourself, but yeah, I'm just wondering if what is it just that this is a different stage of my life, and yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I honor where you're at because there is no right and there is no wrong. So it's whatever you find pleasure in. So if being with your grandkids is was pleasurable for you, then I think that's wonderful. If there's things that you wanted more of, then we would explore that. But that could be like going and getting a facial or a massage because everyone always thinks, oh, I'm not having an orgasm, so I'm not in pleasure. I'm like, what was pleasurable to get to that orgasm?
Hmm.
What was when you wake up in the morning? What kind of rituals or things do you do that's just for you?
Hmm.
And right there is where your pleasure is.
Yeah, yeah.
How does that sound to you?
Yeah, and that's exactly what I focused. I've turned inward in these last 2 years and just worked on me. I was a single mom. I worked full time in a career, a very great professional career, and yeah, so it was like now it's just focusing on me. And I do find that pleasurable, like don't interrupt my morning coffee with spirit, because that's that's a no-no. That's my time. And yeah, it's changed quite drastically, like that foreseeing, of being with a partner. I mean, it would be fun to have a companion to do stuff with, but you know for whatever reason, yeah, maybe I'm thinking it's just the health issues that have kind of suppressed that desire for sexuality, or maybe it's just the time in my life. I'm not sure.
And it could be because, different people change over time, and that's part of my husband and I's journeys too, is, his desires are becoming different than my own and working through that. It's partnering but self-love and loving self is what it really comes down to.
Right. Yeah. No, I can see that, and I really appreciate your journey and your story, because it's like I said, like Patty, I'm very conservative, obviously, compared to, but I also experienced a partner of my first marriage who had multiple affairs on me, and so that kind of is a trigger where I'm a bit standoffish about swinging and all that, because he was totally into that. And Yeah, I mean, met women on the internet and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very, hesitant about my kids have tried to hook me up on internet. I'm like, no, I'm not going on an internet relationship. Because so many people lie and they disguise themselves, right?
Oh, they do lie. I have a whole other story about that. Yeah, I could talk for a very long time about that. There's a lot of adventures of because I go meet people by myself and couples and single men and it's it's hard to find real people. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. Thank you for your insight. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thank you for being brave and being the first person to ask a question.
All right, here we go. First of all, thank you so much. This is OnePlus8 Pro. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your story and journey with us. How do you not lose yourself in allowing your partner to enjoy life to their fullest and play out their desires?
How do you I
Yeah, so I'll say it again. How do you not lose yourself in allowing your partner to enjoy life to their fullest and play out their desires?
guess I would dig more into that, like how they feel they are losing themselves by letting their partner be who they want
Mhm,
to be. I
mhm,
ask people a
mhm.
lot,
Like
especially
you
younger people, like, do you feel like you've set up a container where your partner would feel safe to come to you and ask you for what they really want? Because if the only conversation you ever had is if I catch you, you're dead, that's not a conversation. That's just telling me I can't come to you. So I'm going to hide and I'm not going to tell you the truth. So if
Yeah,
they could be a little more clear of how they're losing their self, I need a little more around that.
yeah, yeah, because that's kind of a big statement, right? So to kind of go on the assumption that we are losing ourselves if we open up a relationship and we want, as you said, you want your partner to have all that they desire. And I also think you said, I want all that I desire too. That I have my desires, and
Yeah.
so it's a mutual understanding.
Well, and now knowing what those are, because
Hmm.
I didn't know what those are because I just lived my life to please everybody else around me and didn't question that. That was what I was supposed to do and that's what I did. And coming into what gives me pleasure and what I want and then learning how to ask for that.
Hmm.
And not only ask for it, but be solid and this is what I need and how are we going to work till I get my needs met? And I'm not willing to sacrifice those needs.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and that doesn't sound like a woman who's lost herself at all.
Yeah, I
um,
haven't lost myself. I found myself.
right,
But
and
that doesn't mean that some women don't feel that way because I have clients whose husbands will book them to go do things that are very uncomfortable to them. And they end up, your body will not lie. So if you're saying you will do something that you don't want to do, and then suddenly you get an infection in your vagina, or you get a fever blister, or your body starts to relate, it is telling you what you would and speak your words to say.
hmm, hmm,
And as women, we have been taught to just do what is asked of us, and that's what makes a good wife. So I also work with a lot of my women clients and teaching them, what do you want? Most of them don't know.
Right, and there's so much that or don't dare speak to it because of the internalized judgments about it. I can't possibly want that. I wouldn't be a good person, a good wife, a good whatever, if that's what I wanted.
Yeah. And that doesn't really go away. I mean,
Mhm.
you're constantly becoming more conscious of that in your own self because it's been so installed. And that's what for myself, because I've learned other certifications, I know how to rewire my brain. And I take myself back into my own childhood. Um, for example, when was my pleasure? When was I taught that I wasn't allowed pleasure? That can go all the way back to someone saying that you should only breastfeed or have a bottle every 4 hours, and you were
Mhm.
crying and your needs weren't met. And that bottle, that oralness of sucking on a breast was your pleasure at that moment, and it was taken away. And so that was just the beginning. That was before the cookie. And
Yeah.
so we have to go all the way back to when we were children and figure out, well, when was that taught to me? When was it taught to me that I was supposed to sacrifice my wants and needs for others around me? And for me, that goes all the way back to when I was a baby too, because oh, the baby smells so good. I just want to hold the baby, not caring whether I wanted to be held. And
Mhm.
I am a person very, very affected by energy of others. I can sense things about everybody around me. And so having all these different adults just deciding they were just going to hold me without opening their arms and letting me come to them, I was taught early, no, you're going to do what we want you to do. You're going to say yes. You're going to behave as you're supposed to behave. And if you don't, you're going to get spanked or you're going to get punished or all these things are going to happen. And all of that is just conditioning. And I have just spent the last 11 years fighting all that. Not from
Mm.
the outside world, but from inside my own self.
Mhm. 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 Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. Is the right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
understand.
Danae, yeah.
Can I jump in, guys?
Yes.
Sure, Danae.
I have a question. In your profession as an erotic coach, what are your major challenges with your clients?
Um, my challenges, well, I guide my clients. I don't come in and say you should do this or I'm always like finding what they want. What's the most challenging is when I have two individuals that want exactly the opposite of each other and they're not telling each other the truth. They have no problem telling me, but getting them to communicate or understand where the other one is coming from is probably my biggest challenge. But it's also the most fun.
Okay, understood. I'll yield the floor, but I have other questions.
Okay.
No, it's okay. If anybody else has any other questions, let them go first. I believe Danae had said something in the chat. Hey, Danae,
Mm,
how are you?
she just said that she's also very affected by other people's energy.
Okay, so I guess my next question is sexuality can be very damaging to people depending on how it's used. Okay, so we have a lot of women who are in marriages who only have sex because they want to keep their marriage together. Okay, and it has been my experience because I have been a psychotherapist for a long time that creates damage within the individual. So a lot of people have a preconceived ideas of what polyamorous behavior is like, and they generally think that it's a negative. It has a negative impact on people's marriages and so on. But your experience has been completely different. So, what would be your advice to people who want to branch out and open their marriage for greater pleasure, as an example?
Take it slow. It could be, I treat it similar to like going into a BDSM scene where everything is negotiated beforehand. And once the scene begins, it doesn't change. So once you've negotiated, we're going to try this, we don't get an aroused state and go further than that. That's when people tend to get hurt. So, say we're going to go to a club. It could just be getting dressed up and going to the club that we find sexy and we've agreed upon. And so we don't go and someone invite us back into the back room and we go do that. We find out what the back room is. And then we go home and we re-talk about it when we have taken ourselves out of that situation. And then we go back in. And that's also something that a coach can help you with, because I do immersions. So if my couples are like, well, we really want to go to a swingers club, or we really want to go to a nudist resort, but we're kind of afraid to go by themselves, then having someone that can kind of guide you is something that is very possible, and teaching how to take it slow. If you're afraid to go into a BDSM club where you know that people are going to be using, my husband still hasn't went into a BDSM club. I tried to talk him into going to one in France, and when he walked up, they were like, well, first they said we weren't in dress code, and I was like, well, if I take off my clothes, am I in dress code? I hadn't done BDSM at the time, but I was just, we're in France, let's go in. But then the next time we went back, the bouncer took a bullwhip and he did this, made it smack really loud, and I've never seen my husband run away so fast. So having someone that can kind of like explain to you what goes on, take you there safely, give you different ways to look at it. Like a threesome doesn't have to be a threesome. It could be a dildo stuck to a window. Just taking a different concept, asking, what is your fantasy? Where are you comfortable playing with it? And that it doesn't have to be involving things that you're not ready for or you're scared of. And a lot of people, that's what they don't know how to do, is how to break it down into steps to where their partner would be comfortable. Or they feel comfortable to share it because they know that they can have that communication, feel safe asking for what they want, and having the negotiation between the two, that it's safe to talk back and forth. Okay, this is what I feel comfortable trying to do with that. Or sometimes they're like, okay, the wife is like, okay, I'm comfortable doing that, but I want my coach to come with me and be there with me. And so that, it's just really individualized on what each person needs. And having the empathy, the patience, the compassion to be able to take it all the way back to the beginning for every person. Not everybody has to do what I do. That was my personal choice. I don't go and tell my clients, well, you need to do what I do. It's what do you want to do? Let me help you do it safely.
Okay, understood. That makes sense. So, what would that breaking down and sort of acclimatization process look like? Could you just walk us through what that would look like?
It's a lot of listening and asking questions. Like I said, usually my clients really don't know a lot about me until sometimes they bring something up and I might say, would you like another perspective around that? My lifestyle can be rather intimidating to some people. But it's fascinating. But they're not coming to me to learn about me always. They're coming for them to learn about their adventure and why I'm such a good coach is because I can take them from where they're at and let them take those baby steps and then offer them, would you like to take another step? And it's their choice whether they do that or not. And that's why I love what I do. But I do have a lot of knowledge to kind of like say, well, did you think about this? And if you've never been in a BDSM club, how are you going to even offer that to somebody? If you never went to a takeover, what are you going to say to them when they want to try to go to a swingers event and you've never been a swinger? There's an advantage that I've had all these experiences.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm. Mhm.
The floor is everyone else's. Does anyone else have any questions?
Danny asked something, Danae asked something in the chat. She said, with sexual programming since we were born, what age do you recommend that all this sexual diversity should be taught?
I think it depends on the child. If they're showing curiosity, or you see them touching themselves in some ways, it's time to have some healthy communication around that and not shaming them and getting where they're getting in trouble. So,
Mm.
saying, hey, it's okay that you want to touch your body. I know that feels good, but maybe that's something you do in the privacy of your own room. And teaching that at an early age. And getting curious. I definitely caught my children doing things. I caught my little boys and my neighbor boys. They were licking each other's butts under the bed. So I was curious. So it's what was best for me was to talk about it, not put it in the closet.
Right. Any other questions from from the chat or from our participants? Just raise your hands. I think.
If there are no other questions, I would like to just show what Mrs. Jones and our host are doing in the world. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a little bit of a shared screen here with you guys.
All right.
And this is Mrs. Jones' landing page. I will drop the landing page into the chat. For those of you who are interested in her services, please feel free to visit a page. She has a video here for you guys as well to see. So if you guys are thinking about branching out to your marriage and you need steps as an example on polyamorous, or if you are having difficulty with the sexual aspect of your being and of your own world, Mrs. Jones is here to assist you. And she obviously has the experience and the certifications and the qualifications to assist you where this is concerned. And I want to just take a little note to show us our host's website. This is Patty Lucia. So I know she didn't promote herself, so I'm going to do it. Right. So apart from running a podcast, she also is a writer. And Patty is extremely proficient at writing because she's been teaching English for a while. And as you can see, she has free writing consultations for those of you who want to write or have businesses that you need copy for. Now, I have personally seen her work, so I can vouch for Patty at 110%. So she also has a book that is for sale. I believe that book is on the Wildflower series. Okay.
It's under books.
It's on the books, right? Sorry. I'm gonna just All right, so it's on the book. So if you are interested in Patty's book, you might want to take a look at her book. I can tell you that she's absolutely a proficient writer that I can assure you guys of. And if you guys are just curious and want to have a session with Patty or with Mrs. Jones, I believe Mrs. Jones has a 10-day, 15-minute consultation, free consultation. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, so she has a 10-minute free consultation in which she will be pretty much showing you everything that you need to know in 15 minutes. You could tell her your story, and she could take it from there. So if you guys are interested in contacting her, I'm going to be dropping her landing page as well as her contact information and Patty's landing page, and as well as the contact information inside the pages that we are running this stream to. Okay, thank you very much, guys. I'll just pass it back on to Patty.
All right. Well, this has been, and I think when I put it up, I said you and Mrs. Jones part one, because I think you and I will probably be doing this on a regular, and I am really very much looking forward to that. So, are there? Do you have any last words to share with us, Mrs. Jones, before we tie this up?
Just want to be in thankfulness to get to share my story. I've kept it in hiding for a long time. It feels really good to like share and hope it makes a big difference to other women's lives and to their husbands too, or other partners.
Yeah, and you know what I was thinking, Miss Jones, is that this would make a great book. So we should talk about that. That would be awesome. The last, when we had a conversation, I just wanted to ask this one last thing. You said something really profound, and I just wanted, to see if you'd like to say a few words about that. And it had to do with sex and power, and feeling your own power when you walk into a room, and having that, embodying that power. You mentioned it a little bit when you spoke about the 70-year-old woman, the presence that she had when she walked into the room. Could you, before we go, could you say a few words about that experience of your sexuality and power, and that sense of power that you carry?
Yeah, it's funny. David gave me a meditation to do the other day, and it was a script about bringing on this sexual erotic magnetism. And I read it for him, and it was the picture that he put on the website of me from behind is actually me looking in the mirror. And I had been body painted when I was going out. So basically I wasn't wearing a top, but I had this painting of flowers on my breasts. And when I read that meditation, it took me back to that moment of looking at myself in the mirror and seeing myself as this erotic being. And even as I was preparing for this talk, that person that I hide, that person that is so strong inside of me, was coming to this talk so excited to be heard and so confident and grounded in knowing that this is who I am. And to be able to find a way to say that, like, this is who I fucking am.
Mm-hmm.
and be comfortable in my own body with that. I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed of this amazing journey I've been on and that I'm going on still. And that is that sexual magnetism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. The wheels are already turning about where we can go the next time that we get together. I think we can really get into some of the nitty.
Really? If you got,
I assume you were playing something.
We can really get into some of the nitty gritty in our next chat. But this has been really wonderful. I look forward to the next time. And our listeners, you have Mrs. Jones' information. She is a coach and a good one, and you should definitely contact her about her services. If you're interested in my books, just visit my website, and I look forward to the next time we have a chat. Mrs. Jones, this has been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Patty.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Thank
Yes,
you.
we will.
Record.